Good morning. This is Sean Spence with Let's Talk Poverty Perspectives, thoughts on solving poverty in the United States. When we talk about poverty in America, we often reduce 37 million people to a number. But here's what that really means. If poverty were a state, it would be the second largest in the nation, bigger than Texas, with only California surpassing it. We've created an invisible California of struggling Americans, and most of us drive right past them every single day. Let me tell you about Maria. She's not a real person. She's a composite of dozens of people I've met through my work. Maria works 38 hours a week at a retail store, not 40, because that would require benefits. She makes $12.50 an hour, which sounds reasonable until you do the math. That's about $24,700 a year before taxes. The federal poverty line for a family of three is $24,860. Maria has two kids. Here's where it gets interesting. Maria doesn't qualify as poor by many assistance program standards because she makes just slightly too much. She's trapped in what researchers call the benefits cliff, that cruel space where earning an extra dollar can cost you hundreds in assistance. So she turns down overtime. She turns down promotions because in America's poverty system, success is often punished. The University of Wisconsin's Institute for Research on Poverty confirms what seems absurd. Families can face effective marginal tax rates exceeding 80% when accounting for the loss of benefits like SNAP, housing assistance, and child care subsidies. That means for every additional dollar earned, they lose 80 cents in benefits and taxes. Try explaining that incentive structure to someone who's never experienced it. Here's something that makes everyone uncomfortable. We've built a poverty industry in America. According to the Census Bureau and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, federal and state governments spend over $1 trillion annually on means tested programs. That's trillion with a T. Yet poverty rates have remained stubbornly consistent for decades, fluctuating between 11% and 15% since the 1970s, per the U.S. Census Bureau's historical data. This is not an argument against helping people. It is an observation that our current approach resembles giving someone a bucket to bail water from a sinking boat instead of fixing the hole. We have created an entire ecosystem of nonprofits, government agencies, and programs that depend on poverty's existence. I say this as someone who works in that system, who has raised millions for these causes. We're treating symptoms, not causes, and we've become comfortable with it. Think of poverty like quicksand, not the Hollywood version where you sink dramatically, but the real kind. In actual quicksand, the more you struggle alone, the deeper you sink. You need someone to throw you a rope, and you need solid ground to pull yourself onto. Our current system throws ropes, but there's no solid ground at the other end, just more quicksand, slightly shallower. Let me tell you about James. He's 58, working in manufacturing for 30 years until automation eliminated his position. The Brookings Institution reports that automation has displaced millions of workers in manufacturing, with communities like ours bearing the brunt. James tried retraining, took classes at the community college in computer skills, but here's what the statistics don't capture. At 58, he's competing for entry-level positions against 25-year-olds who grew up with this technology, who will work for less, who don't have the health issues that come with 3 decades of physical labor. James is invisible in most poverty discussions, Because he's not a child, not a single mother, not elderly. He's a man who played by the rules, worked hard, and got left behind by forces completely beyond his control. The Urban Institute confirms that mid career job loss, especially for older workers, often results in permanent wage reductions averaging 20% or more. James now works part time at a hardware store, lives in a room he rents, and has exactly $147 in savings. Here's what really keeps me up at night. We've normalized poverty in ways that would horrify our grandparents. When I grew up, a full time job meant you could afford rent and groceries. The National Low Income Housing Coalition reports that in 0 counties nationwide can a minimum wage worker afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment. 0. We've accepted that working full time is no longer sufficient for basic stability, and we've decided that's just how things are now. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Economic Policy Institute, real wages for the bottom 50% of earners have essentially stagnated for 40 years, while productivity has soared. We're working harder, producing more, and taking home the same slice of an ever growing pie. But we've been convinced this is about personal responsibility rather than systemic design. The faces behind poverty statistics aren't who we imagine. The U.S. Census Bureau's data shows that over 40% of people in poverty are employed. They're working, often multiple jobs, and still can't make ends meet. Another uncomfortable fact: according to multiple sources, including the Pew Research Center, most people in poverty are white. That doesn't diminish the disproportionate impact on communities of color. Poverty rates are indeed higher among Black and Hispanic Americans, but it reveals how we've racialized poverty in our minds in ways that don't match reality and prevent building broader coalitions for change. Here's perhaps the most important statistic. The Census Bureau's supplemental poverty measure shows that without government intervention, poverty would be dramatically higher. Social Security alone lifts 27 million above the poverty line. So when we talk about cutting entitlements, we're really talking about creating more Marias and Jameses, more families choosing between medicine and meals. Maria and James aren't asking for handouts. They're asking for a system where hard work leads to stability, where playing by the rules doesn't leave you one car repair away from homelessness. We're asking for what we claim America already provides: opportunity. The statistics say 37 million Americans live in poverty. But that's not just a number. It's 37 million morning routines, 37 million people making impossible choices, 37 million sets of dreams deferred. Until we see the faces behind these statistics, until we recognize that poverty isn't a personal failing, but often a systemic feature, we'll keep applying the same band-aids to the same wounds. The question isn't whether we can afford to fix this, it's whether we can afford not to. I'm Sean Spence. Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Poverty Perspectives. Learn more at povertyactivist.com. Together, we can solve poverty.